Welcome to today's 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of Matthew. Today we're looking at Matthew chapter 9, verses 14 through 17. Now in this passage, Jesus makes some interesting comments about fasting and about new wine and new wineskins. It's a very familiar passage to us, but let's look at it again and see what Jesus is trying to teach us through this saying. Now, John's disciples came and asked Jesus. Now, when it says John's disciples, that's the disciples of John the Baptist. They came and asked Jesus, "How is it that we and the Pharisees fast, but your disciples do not fast?" Now, the disciples of the Baptist, John the Baptist, have a question about religious practices. Fasting is a common religious practice, a practice of devotion and of prayer. The Pharisees did it. The disciples of John the Baptist did it. Most biblical followers have done it throughout history. But what they're surprised about is that the disciples of Jesus don't seem to regularly practice fasting. And so they ask Jesus, why? He answers, "How can the guest of the bridegroom mourn while he is with them? Time will come when the bridegroom will be taken from them, and then they will fast." He makes this rather interesting statement about a bridegroom being present, and so you don't fast during the time the bridegroom is present. Now is a time for feasting. What does he mean? Jesus is the bridegroom. He has come to call his bride, the church, to him. And while he is present, it's a time to feast, the marriage feast. Later, he says, my disciples will fast when I am no longer physically present with them. So he's simply saying to the questioners who come from John the Baptist, he's saying now is not the appropriate time to fast because I'm physically present. My disciples will observe this practice in the future, but not now. But then he goes on to say something more. He's talked a little bit about fasting and why they don't fast now, but then he starts talking about new wine and new wineskins. That's the interesting part. He says, "No one sews a patch of unshrunk cloth or a new cloth on an old garment, for the patch will pull away from the garment and it'll make the tear worse. Neither do men pour new wine into old wineskins. If they do, the skins will burst. The wine will run out. The wineskins will be ruined. No, they pour new wine into new wineskins, and then both are preserved." From this initial question about fasting, Jesus wants to make a comment about the new thing that God is doing. New cloth. You don't put new cloth on old cloth. It won't work. New wine. You don't put new wine into old wineskins. You put new wine into new wineskins. Jesus is saying this, the work that God is now doing, that is manifest in my presence and in my proclamation of the kingdom, this is a new work of God. And you cannot put it into the old forms and the old procedures. It won't work. There are new procedures today. There are new practices because this new wine of the gospel, this new wine of the kingdom is a new reality that God is doing. And therefore the expressions of it must be new as well. What happens in Jesus is a new work of God. The gospel is a new work, and it finds a new expression, which will be through the life of the church. New wine into new wineskins. Now there's also a principle for us there. Sometimes when God begins to do a new work among us, we don't try to pour it into the old forms, the old ways of doing things. Sometimes the new work of God requires a new wineskin. We don't always do things the same old way. Sometimes a new work of God among us, new revival movement requires a new form and a new method and a new expression. You know, they say sometimes in the church we have a saying that we've never done it that way before. Sometimes we get stuck in the old ways, the old wineskins, and we can't express the new work God is doing among us. Let's not do that. When God does a new thing among us, a new expression of reality, a new revival movement, a new movement of the Spirit, when the new wine is flowing, let's put it into the new wineskins using new methods and new ways of doing things. We don't always have to be stuck in the old ways. New wine requires new wineskins. I believe God is beginning to do a new thing among us today. And we must look for new expressions so that the new wine can be poured into the new wineskins, all by the wonder of life in Jesus. Amen and amen. You have a great day today, and I'll see you next time for our 5-minute Bible study in the Gospel of Matthew.